Hey, hi all. Welcome back to PR Knowledge Center. So in this session, I'll give you an overview about API gateway. So how we will see what is an API gateway and how can we use it to enter the context of microservices, and what are the benefits such as security and latency for our application. So simply, an API gateway is an API management tool that sits between a client and a collection of backend services. So let's get started this, and then you will understand like how it is working out. So let us take an example. I have a front end and I have a back end. So basically, these services for microservices or WCF or APIs or REST APIs, all these things are staying or sitting in backend. Those are called as an backend services here, like microservices of catalog, order, payment, etc., etc. So these are sitting in the backend. So we are developing software application using microservices. So you might have actually different microservices sitting in the backend. So application to connect to these microservices called web application, which is sitting in the front end. This is what my web application. This might have a web application like a single page application based on React or Angular or .NET Core. So here, to connect to those different microservices, let's take an example. If you want to connect here, I think you need to make a hit to here as like kind of relation here. Let's say like I'm hitting to here, and then I'm getting a response from here again. Uh, to get communicate with these microservices, you should be exposed these services publicly, because my front end would be in different server and these are in different servers. So to get access between these kind of front end and back end, you should expose all these services publicly, right? That means you should assign a public IP to this, and so that user can directly connect from the web app to the list of the microservices and get the response. Addition to that information, if you wanted to get kind of a pricing for orders, to create another connection from microservices number 2 here, again what you have to do is again you have to hit to here, and then you have to get a response back. That means for each connection, for each requirement, you have to make a request to the microservice and get the information. If there is a kind of aggregation result you wanted, like kind of product or order list you wanted it, and also instead of each order you want a pricing list, and then a summary kind of information you wanted in the response. So payment details and etc etc. So you have to make every service request from the app. So here we create a view details, but now contains the pricing for their products, and here the residents will get back, etc. etc. is happening from the web app itself. So we'll have a less latency that previously than previously with the web app sending the request is directly to the microservice component. That means basically you have a more time here. It is taking one for one request. It is taking some time like 500 milliseconds, and another request is taking another 500 milliseconds, and another request is taking another 500 milliseconds. So all these time is accumulating, and taking a lot of time to block the services access by other requests, which can be time consuming here, so that it is getting increasing the latency here. So, and also the data will be aggregated, like the first request could go to the microservice one, get back of the data, right? So here the details for the product, then second request could be issued by the API gateway, sorry, directly from the web app, to get the catalog of orders, and then getting of payment details, etc., etc. So this comes into the picture of kind of latency here. And also when you expose a public IP for each microservices, so this could be exposed to the hackers, because you are publicly exposing this through internet. They will be exposed to the hackers. So this is a security issue because of exposing the public IP addresses to the internet. So we'll have another problem. Actually, web needs to get information from two or three services. So that needs to create a first connection to the microservices and second connection to the microservices. So the data will be aggregated, like the first request could go to the microservice one and get back something like that. So I think these are kind of stuff I'm going to explain you. So security and latency problems with the exposing of public IP and having different direct connection from the web app. So to remove these or to kind of come across or resolve these problems, so we must have kind of a API gateway which sits between client and backend servers. So this API gateway, what it is doing is it is taking the request from the client, okay, and then it sends to the backend server, okay. So here I'll not expose these kind of public IPs because I'll only expose these IPs as private and only API gateway IP make it as a public. So these two are communicating with each other in this different server, and these services won't expose to outside, so that the security risks will get decreased here, and also aggregated information. So as I mentioned, if you wanted to get the summarized data of different services responses back to app, and I'll extract the response from each individual microservice into an API gateway, and from here I'll now get the aggregated response using aggregated pattern here in the API gateway, and then I'll send back to a client. So here we'll have a less latency than previously with the web app, sending them requests directly to the microservice component. So here we have a good internet connection, so the API gateway could aggregate data with aggregate pattern, because these both are sitting in the different component, and this is different component or different server. These internets are these API gateway and microservices internet connection definitely have a good connectivity, and then getting a faster response and request, and it is definitely reducing the latency. So the other API gateway cool features also having here, like kind of cross-cutting concerns first of all. So let us look at those. The first one is authentication and authorization. And that means before coming to API gateway, each microservices have authentication and authorization. And if you want to update authentication in one of this kind of microservice, so what it is happening is we need to update it in all the microservices and then do a testing. Basically, it's not a good approach or practice to do that. So it's not a good practice basically when we write a code from kind of microservice, right? So that one added benefit, actually those are of using it API gateway. So if I do all this stuff here, like this kind of stuff here itself, authentication and authorization, and no need to do this stuff in individual API or microservices, which could be a single point authentication and authorization. And coming to the other good feature was response caching, service discovering. Okay, service discovering is nothing but, so basically it's one more good practice, good benefit with this, because API gateway could know that different microservices that has its indicated in API gateway itself. This new microservice will expose to it's to a own a Swagger API definition of API gateway. With this, I'll have a less coupling between web app and those individual microservices. So another advantage was a kind of retrained circuit breaker. So when we use microservices, then we wanted application to be high available. For that, we attempt for our try policies using poly library with the circuit breaker. If the first fails to my service request, then I might retry after 2 seconds, after 4 seconds, and so on until I have a reaches like tries during the request to get the response for 4 minutes. For example, So then some reasons we might think that the microservices one would be then we should stop sending the request through using circuit breaker pattern, and those patterns would be transmitted into code. So that way I think we will put our services high availability, and then one no stop worrying of no accessing your services, and because you are putting this circuit and retry logic there, and your services would be always available, and it won't give any kind of failed messages back to response to the API gateway. So another advantage is coming when we wanted actually to put it here was caching, or sorry, rate limit, which basically again kind of putting your service high availability, and also reduces the lot of response request processing, because when we wanted actually to apply a limit for the number of number, for example, I cannot call a microservice number more than 100 times, and or 50 times in 1 second, or for example we can apply that if you have external access to our application, like third party applications microservices. So I wanted to limit their access to my backend. That way I'm going to reduce the connectivity to my microservices, to reduce the burden on other request access. Another advantage or cool feature was load balancing, because when the instances or requests are coming to my microservice, so when a concurrent request or multiple instances are coming to my microservice, so sometimes it won't process these requests in the specific time. Then I put a load balancing my API gateway, so that it will distribute my instances or HTTP traffic to a microservices, and then it balance the process and reduce the blockages of my request and response process. And another cool feature was logging and tracing. So that is kind of logging and tracing. That is there is a connection or request coming from web app to API gateway, and here in this API gateway, so I'll put login mechanism saying that request is carrying so on so XML or JSON, and then sending to a microservice one, and after getting of a response from my microservice to API gateway, I'll again log the kind of response log there to validate the response. If there is a situation comes in like saying that error is coming or a response is not unexpected, then we'll get into this and we'll validate the logs. Okay, and coming to the other feature was kind of IP whitelist. That means if you wanted to stop attackers from using or accessing your microservices via API gateway, then we have an IP whitelist where you can block the specific IP addresses. So the IP addresses related clients or applications should not come to your microservices, uh, because you are validating IP whitelist concept in the API gateway. So these are some of the features we have in API gateway, which are securely connecting to your microservices and getting a response back to your app. So I suggest everyone to use API gateway and should stop sending or getting or a response from your microservices individually directly, and use API gateway, because this is where unified entry point for all microservices, and all the mentioned features and the development are being done in API gateway level, where you have a single entry and single validation place here, and exposing of all endpoints also coming from API gateway. So along with this, we have a couple of drawbacks also, like everything is happening in single place and single uh, entry point here in the that is API gateway. If API gateway is getting down, so complete application will get failure on getting down. So because things are happening in the single place, single point of failure, and hence I think we must deploy different API gateways and make use of all those other API gateways and put it in some load balancing configuration, and then achieve the kind of resolve or stop the failure of this API gateway failures. So there are some other open source tools. We have it kind of getting API gateways like Kong and Ambassador, and coming to the GoSelect for .NET Core and for Azure API management gateway. So those open sources you can use it to implement API gateway. So this is something about API gateway of advantages to use microservice access from applications instead of directly connecting to your microservices. So thanks for listening this video, and I hope you understand the purpose and the advantage of API gateway, and kind of security or performance benefits you are getting other than non-functional aspects with this API gateway. Thank you.